rifle felt wrong in Claire Hendriss's hands. Not physically. It was the same standard M4A1 she'd carried through 3 deployments, the same weight distribution, the same familiar grip, texture worn smooth by thousands of hands before hers. But standing on the qualification range at Fort Campbell, surrounded by fresh-faced recruits who looked at her like she was ancient history, Claire felt the wrongness down to her bones. 8 months since her last qualification shoot. 32 months since her last deployment. 32 months since she'd felt alive. She squeezed the trigger. The round punched through the 300-meter target center mass with mechanical precision. Perfect shot. No feeling whatsoever. Outstanding, Sergeant Hendriss. The range safety officer marked his clipboard without looking up. You're cleared for another 6 months. Another 6 months. The words landed like a prison sentence. Claire safed the weapon and handed it back, her movements automatic, her mind already drifting to the stack of unread reports waiting on her desk. Training schedules, ammunition requisitions, performance evaluations for recruits who would deploy to places she'd never see again while she rotted behind government-issue furniture. Teaching skills she wasn't allowed to use anymore. She walked back to her office in Building 7, a cinder-block monument to bureaucratic efficiency, and sat down in front of a computer screen that had become her entire world. The cursor blinked. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere outside, she could hear the distant crack of rifle fire from the advanced range, where the people who actually mattered were training for missions that would actually happen. The nightmares had started 6 months ago. Not the kind she'd expected. Not flashbacks of combat. Not the faces of the dead. Those she could have handled. Those she'd been trained for. Instead, Claire dreamed about the desk. About sitting in this exact chair, filling out this exact paperwork, while the years stretched into decades and her skills atrophied into memory, and her purpose dissolved into nothing but a pension and a flag in a grave. She woke from those dreams gasping, her hands reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. Her phone buzzed. Claire glanced at the screen and felt something shift in her chest, a crack in the numbness that had become her default state. Rachel, 48-hour leave approved. You coming or not? Claire stared at the message for a long moment. Her identical twin sister, Captain Rachel Hendriss, commanding officer of a 37-person outpost at Forward Operating Base Delta 7, a frozen hellhole in the mountains that the Army barely acknowledged existed. They hadn't seen each other in 14 months. They'd spoken maybe 6 times in the past year, and even those conversations had been strained, careful, 2 women who shared DNA and nothing else anymore. If that opening hooked you, trust me, this story only gets more intense. Subscribe now for more real stories of courage and sacrifice, and hit that notification bell so you never miss one. Now, let me take you back to how it all began. Claire's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The cursor blinked. She typed, "I'm coming." 3 words. The first real decision she'd made in 32 months. 2 days later, Claire was strapped into the jump seat of a CH-47 Chinook, watching the landscape transform below her. Green valleys gave way to brown foothills, then to snow-capped ridges that looked like the spine of some ancient, frozen beast. The helicopter climbed, engines straining against the thin mountain air, and Claire felt the temperature drop with every 1,000 feet of elevation. FOB Delta 7 appeared through the frost-clouded window like something from a post-apocalyptic film. An abandoned city, half buried in snow, its pre-war architecture now reinforced with sandbags, welded metal sheets, and the stubborn will of soldiers who refused to let this ground go. Guard towers rose from the ruins, some intact, some listing at angles that suggested structural damage, and Claire could see the geometric precision of defensive positions carved into the urban decay. A ghost fortress, a frozen monument to holding impossible ground. The Chinook touched down in a clear courtyard that had probably been a marketplace once, and Claire grabbed her duffel and stepped into air cold enough to burn her lungs. -12 Celsius. The wind cut through her jacket like it wasn't there. And then she saw her. Rachel stood at the edge of the landing zone, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air, her BDUs bearing the insignia of a captain and the wear patterns of someone who never left the field. She looked older than Claire remembered, thinner. The kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix was carved into the lines around her eyes. But when their gazes met, something passed between them, something that transcended the 14 months of silence, the 3,000 miles of distance, the fundamental differences in the paths they'd chosen. They were still twins. Still two halves of something that had been split at birth, but never fully separated. Rachel crossed the courtyard in long strides, her boots crunching through the packed snow. Claire met her halfway, and for a moment they just stood there, two women who looked exactly alike and couldn't have been more different, searching each other's faces for signs of damage. "You look like hell," Rachel said finally. Claire almost laughed. "Coming from you, that's impressive. When's the last time you slept?" "Define sleep." They embraced brief military, with an undercurrent of something deeper, and then Rachel was leading her through the maze of improvised fortifications toward what had once been a municipal building and was now the command center. Claire cataloged everything she saw with the automatic precision of someone who'd spent years reading terrain for threats. Sight lines, cover positions, the placement of crew-served weapons, the gaps in perimeter that would need to be addressed. The base was undermanned. Even without access to the duty roster, Claire could see it in the stretch patrol rotations, the tired faces, the way too few people were trying to cover too much ground. 37, Rachel said, reading her sister's expression. Down from 52 when I took command. Medical evacuations, rotation delays that never got processed, and 3 transfers that went through before I could stop them. She shook her head. Headquarters keeps promising reinforcements. Headquarters keeps lying. Why do you stay? The question came out before Claire could stop it, and she watched something flicker across Rachel's face. A brief flash of the same emptiness Claire felt every morning when she sat down at her desk. Because someone has to. Rachel pushed open the door to the command building. And because they're mine. Every soldier on this base is my responsibility. I don't get to leave them just because the mission got harder. The words landed with unexpected weight. Claire had left. Not by choice. She'd been reassigned, bureaucratically exiled to a training position that wasted everything she was. But she'd left nonetheless. And Rachel had stayed. They settled into Rachel's quarters, a converted office with a cot, a desk, and a small electric heater that barely dented the cold. Claire sat on the edge of the cot, while Rachel produced 2 metal cups and a bottle of something amber that definitely wasn't regulation. Bourbon, Rachel explained, pouring. A corporal's mother sent it. Said her son told her I needed it more than he did. Did you? Probably. Rachel handed her a cup and settled into the desk chair. So, tell me about the exciting world of marksmanship instruction. Claire took a long drink, letting the burn chase away some of the cold. I file reports that no one reads. I teach recruits who will never be as good as we were. I qualify on weapons I'll never use in combat again. I go home to an empty apartment, and I have nightmares about paperwork. She set the cup down. I'm going crazy, Rachel. 32 months of absolutely nothing that matters. Rachel was quiet for a moment, studying her sister with an intensity that felt almost like a sniper's scope. You were the best I ever saw, she said finally. That shot in Kandahar, was still the longest confirmed kill in theater when I deployed here. People talk about it like it was a myth, like you weren't real. Claire's jaw tightened. That was another life. Was it? Rachel leaned forward. Or is this the other life? The desk, the paperwork, the slow death by irrelevance. Is that who you really are? Or is it just who they made you become? The question hung in the cold air between them, and Claire didn't have an answer. She'd been asking herself the same thing for 32 months, lying awake in the dark, reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. Show me the range, she said. Rachel's eyebrows rose. Now! It's 2,300. Minus 12 and dropping. Now! Something shifted in Rachel's expression. A spark of recognition, maybe hope. She stood and grabbed her coat. Follow me. The range was a 750-meter corridor carved through the ruins on the eastern edge of the base, with improvised target positions at 300, 500, and 750 meters. Floodlights illuminated the first 200 meters. Beyond that, shooters relied on night optics or the cold light of the moon. Rachel led Claire to the firing position and unlocked the armory locker bolted to the base of what had once been an apartment building. Inside, Claire saw a standard issue M4S, a few designated marksman rifles, ammunition crates, and, hanging in a place of honor, a custom bolt-action rifle that made her breath catch. Yours, Claire asked. Rachel lifted the weapon with the reverence of someone handling a religious artifact. Modified Remington 700 action, custom barrel. Suppressor I bartered from a JSOC guy who owed me a favor, and a scope that cost more than my car. She held it out. Want to try it? Claire shook her head. That's your rifle. I'll use whatever you've got that's serviceable. Rachel produced a second Remington 700, older, less modified, but well-maintained. Claire took it, feeling the weight settle into her hands, and something deep inside her began to wake up. 300 meters first, Rachel said. Winds northwest at 8 knots. Temperature's going to affect your ballistics. Cold air is denser, so expect a flatter trajectory than you're used to. Claire chambered around, pressed her cheek against the stock, and found the target through the scope. A steel silhouette, frost-covered, barely visible in the limited light. She breathed. She steadied. She squeezed. The rifle kicked against her shoulder, and 300 meters downrange, the steel rang. Center mass. Rachel confirmed through her spotting scope. Not bad for 8 months of rust. Claire worked the bolt, chambered another round, and fired again. Another hit. Another. She moved through the magazine with methodical precision, each shot landing within inches of the last, and with each trigger pull she felt more of herself coming back online. 500, she said. Rachel adjusted the spotting scope, while Claire shifted her position, compensating for the increased range. The wind was picking up. She could feel it tugging at her jacket, and she made the mental calculations automatically. 2¼ minutes of angle right. Hold half an inch high. She fired. The steel sang. You're showing off, Rachel said, but there was warmth in her voice now, something that hadn't been there 14 months ago. 750. Claire, 750. Rachel sighed and adjusted the scope again. Claire found the target, barely visible now, a dark shape against darker ruins, and began the calculations. At this range, with this wind and temperature, she was dealing with significant bullet drop and drift. The cold would flatten her trajectory slightly, but the gusting wind was unpredictable. She'd need to time her shot between gusts, commit to her hold, and trust 32 months of muscle memory that she thought had atrophied into nothing. She waited, breathed, watched the wind, and fired. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, faint but unmistakable, the ring of steel on steel echoed back through the frozen ruins. Mother of God, Rachel whispered. Claire lowered the rifle, and for the first time in 32 months, she felt something that wasn't emptiness. It wasn't joy exactly. It was more like recognition, a reunion with a version of herself she thought was dead. I'm still here, she said, more to herself than to Rachel. I'm still in here somewhere. Rachel set down the spotting scope and looked at her sister with something approaching awe. Claire, that shot was lucky. Wind could have shifted. Luck had nothing to do with it. Rachel stood and walked to the firing line, standing beside her twin. You were always better than me. Even when we trained together, even when I outscored you on the technical evaluations, when it mattered, when the pressure was real, you were the one who never missed. And look where it got me. A desk in Fort Campbell and 32 months of nothing. Maybe Rachel's voice was quiet now, almost lost in the wind. Or maybe you just haven't found the right moment yet. The moment where what you are becomes undeniable again. They stayed on the range until 0200, taking turns behind the rifles, calling each other's shots, falling back into a rhythm they'd established in childhood and perfected through parallel military careers. By the time they returned to the command building, Claire's hands were numb and her face was wind-burned, and she felt more alive than she had in years. They talked until nearly 0300, about the base, about Rachel's soldiers, about the isolation and the cold and the constant low-grade tension of holding ground that the enemy wanted and the army barely supported. Rachel described the men and women under her command with the fierce protectiveness of a mother lion, naming each one, cataloging their strengths and weaknesses, making it clear that these 37 soldiers weren't just a responsibility, they were her family. Walsh is the best NCO I've ever worked with, she said, describing her senior sergeant. Been here longer than anyone. Knows the terrain like he was born in it. If anything happens to me, he keeps this place together. Nothing's going to happen to you. Rachel's smile was tired, knowing this is a combat outpost in contested territory, Claire. Something is always about to happen to someone. Claire woke to the sound of mortar fire. The first explosion hit at 0347 hours. A direct strike on the communications building that vaporized the satellite uplinks and killed 3 soldiers before they could reach cover. The second explosion took out the generator, plunging the base into emergency lighting that flickered red across the snow. Claire was on her feet before she was fully awake, 32 months of inactivity erased in a single heartbeat. She grabbed her boots, her jacket, and the sidearm Rachel had given her, a standard M9 Beretta, woefully inadequate for what she was hearing outside, and burst into the corridor. Chaos. Soldiers ran in every direction, some heading toward defensive positions, others dragging wounded toward the medical station. The distinctive chatter of AK-47 fire mixed with the heavier bark of PKM machine guns, and Claire could hear the rumble of engines somewhere beyond the perimeter wall. Armored vehicles. This wasn't a probing attack. This was an assault designed to wipe the base off the map. She found Rachel in the courtyard, shouting orders into a handheld radio that crackled with static. The communications tower was gone, which meant they were limited to short-range comms only. No way to call for QRF. No way to coordinate with higher command. No way to summon the air support that might have made a difference. 60 to 80 hostiles, Rachel was saying to the soldiers gathered around her, supported by at least 6 light armored vehicles with white winter camouflage. They hit us during shift change. They knew our patterns. This was planned. Orders, ma'am. Walsh's voice was steady despite the chaos. Defensive positions according to contingency plan. I need eyes on those vehicles. If they breach the perimeter wall, we lose the courtyard and everything in it. Priority targets are crew-served weapons and vehicle commanders. We hold until QRF arrives. QRF is 4 hours out minimum, Walsh said. Even if they got the distress beacon before the tower went down, then we hold for 4 hours. Rachel's voice left no room for debate. Move. The soldiers dispersed, and Rachel turned to Claire. For a moment, the mask of command slipped, and Claire saw her sister underneath, terrified, exhausted, facing the possibility that everyone she'd sworn to protect was about to die. You need to get to the shelter, Rachel said. The basement of the medical building. Reinforced concrete, defensible, and you're a civilian. You can't. No, Claire. Give me a rifle and tell me where you need me. Rachel's jaw tightened. You don't have authorization. If you fire a weapon in combat, you're looking at a court-martial. Career ending. Prison, maybe. What career? Claire stepped closer, gripping her sister's arm. Rachel, I've spent 32 months waiting for something to matter again. This matters. These are your people. You are my sister. I'm not hiding in the basement while you fight alone. Another explosion shook the ground. Closer this time, inside the perimeter. Claire heard screaming, the crash of collapsing masonry, and the increased tempo of enemy fire. They had minutes, not hours. Rachel made a decision. Claire saw it happen. The calculation, the acceptance, the letting go of regulations in favor of survival. The water tower, she said. 300 meters southeast of the perimeter. External structure. Good sight lines to the main approach vector. If you can get there, you'll have angle on anyone trying to breach the eastern wall. And you? The industrial crane on the north side. I can see the whole courtyard from there, plus the approach roads. We work in tandem. I call targets. You engage. We cover each other's blind spots. Rachel grabbed Claire's hand and pressed a small tactical radio into it. Channel 7. Our channel. No one else. Claire nodded, already running to the route in her head. 300 meters through contested terrain, in the dark, with hostile fire all around. The rifle from last night. In my quarters. Armory locker. Combination is 0-7-1-4. My birthday. Rachel was already moving toward her own position. Claire, if this goes wrong. It won't. If it does. Rachel's voice cracked just slightly. I love you. Whatever happens, I love you. Claire didn't answer. There wasn't time. She ran. The base was a nightmare of shadows and muzzle flashes. Claire moved through the chaos with the instinct of someone who'd spent 3 deployments learning how to not get killed, hugging walls, using wreckage for cover, timing her movements to the rhythm of enemy fire. She passed wounded soldiers being dragged toward medical, saw a machine gun team setting up in a blown-out storefront, heard the constant crack of rifles and the deeper thump of mortars landing somewhere to the west. Rachel's quarters were dark, the emergency lighting having failed in this section of the base. Claire found the armory locker by touch, punched in the combination, and felt the cool metal of the Remington 700 waiting for her like an old friend. She grabbed it, along with 8 magazines of .308 ammunition, a tactical sling, and a night vision scope she'd noticed Rachel using on the range. Working by muscle memory, she assembled her kit in under 60 seconds and slipped back out into the corridor. The water tower was southeast, past a motor pool, and through a section of the perimeter that was currently taking heavy fire. Claire could see muzzle flashes on the wall, defenders engaging targets somewhere beyond, and heard the distinctive whistle of incoming mortars. She ran anyway. A PCAM opened up somewhere to her left, rounds cracking past close enough that she felt the displacement in the air. She dove behind a burned-out vehicle, waited for the gunner to shift targets, and sprinted the final 50 meters to the water tower's access ladder. The climb was 25 meters of exposed metal, each rung slick with frost, her fingers going them even through her gloves. Below her, the base was a chaos of fire and shadow. Above, the platform waited, a small maintenance area with a low wall that would provide cover and clear sight lines to the eastern approach. She pulled herself over the edge and immediately went prone, settling the rifle into position. The scope lit up the terrain in shades of green, and Claire felt her stomach drop. They were everywhere. 60 hostiles, maybe more, advancing in fire teams through the ruins east of the base. She could see the white camouflage vehicles behind them. 6 light armored units, probably BTR-40s or something similar, their heavy machine guns laying suppressive fire while the infantry moved. The attack was coordinated, professional, and absolutely devastating. Her radio crackled. "Ice, this is Steel." Rachel's voice, steady despite everything. "I'm in position. Will you see?" Claire keyed the mic. "Infantry assault from the east. Multiple fire teams, supported by 6 armored vehicles. They're using the ruins for cover. I count at least 4 PKM positions providing suppressive fire." "Copy. QRF won't be here until 0800 at earliest. We need to slow them down." "Roger." Claire scanned the battlefield, identifying priority targets. "I have eyes on a sniper position. Rooftop, for 100 meters, northeast corner of the collapsed apartment building. He's got angle on the eastern wall. Your people are exposed. Take him." Claire adjusted her position, feeling the cold seep through her jacket as she pressed against the frozen metal platform. 400 meters. Wind northeast at 12 to 15 knots, gusting. Temperature dropping. She calculated her hold, 1.5 minutes right, half-inch high, and found the target through her scope. The enemy's sniper was good. He'd chosen his position carefully, using the collapsed section of roof to create natural cover while maintaining clear lines of fire. He was engaging the defenders on the eastern wall with methodical precision, 1 shot every 4 seconds. Claire watched him take his next shot, saw the muzzle flash, heard the distant crack, watched him work the bolt on what looked like a Dragunov. She squeezed her trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. 400 meters downrange, the enemy sniper's head snapped back, and he crumpled against the rooftop without a sound. "Target down," Claire reported. "Good hit. I've got a PKM crew at 700 meters, southwest corner of the warehouse. They're pinning down Walsh's team." Claire shifted position, finding the new target. The PKM was a crew-served weapon, gunner, assistant, ammo bearer, positioned behind a stack of sandbags that protected their front but left their flank exposed. 700 meters. Wind still gusting. She adjusted, settled, and fired. The gunner slumped. The assistant scrambled for the weapon, and Claire fired again. 2 down. The ammo bearer started to run, and Rachel's voice came to the radio. "I've got him." A moment later, Claire saw the distant muzzle flash from Rachel's position on the crane, and the 3rd man fell. "PKM suppressed," Rachel confirmed. "Walsh, you're clear to advance." The radio crackled with Walsh's acknowledgement, and Claire allowed herself a single breath of satisfaction before scanning for the next target. The next 40 minutes were a masterclass in coordinated death. Claire and Rachel worked in perfect synchronization, 2 halves of a single weapon system, covering each other's blind spots, calling targets, eliminating threats before they could reach the perimeter. Claire's count climbed steadily, 8 confirmed kills, then 12, then 15. Her barrel grew hot despite the cold, and she worked through magazines with methodical efficiency. But the enemy kept coming. For every fire team they eliminated, another took its place. The armored vehicles had moved closer, their machine guns raking the perimeter wall with sustained fire. Claire could see sections of the defensive line crumbling, sandbag positions destroyed, Soldiers falling back to secondary positions. This isn't working, she said into the radio. They're trading bodies for ground. We can't kill them fast enough. I know. Rachel's voice was strained. I'm seeing the same thing. They've got a command element somewhere. Probably one of those vehicles. If we can take out leadership, might break their coordination. Claire scanned the battlefield with fresh eyes. Command element. Someone giving orders, directing the assault, making tactical decisions in real time. She looked at the armored vehicles, tried to identify which one held leadership. There. She found it. A BTR at the rear of the formation, positioned where it could observe the entire battlefield. Through her scope, she could see a figure standing in the commander's hatch, gesturing with what looked like a map and radio. 800 meters, rear vehicle. Commander's hatch. That's your guy. I see him. That's a long shot with these gusts. We take it together. Dual vector. I aim for center mass. You aim for the hatch itself. One of us hits. A pause. On your count. Claire settled into position. 800 meters. Wind northeast at 15 knots, gusting to 20. Temperature continuing to drop. Maybe -5 now. The cold making her fingers clumsy even through her gloves. She calculated her hold. 3 minutes right, 2 inches high. At this range, the bullet would take over a second to arrive. A lot could happen in a second. On 3, she said. 1, 2, 3. They fired together. Claire watched through her scope as the first round, hers, struck the commander in the upper chest, spinning him backward. The second round, Rachel's, punched through the hatch edge and caught him again as he fell. He dropped out of sight, and the vehicle immediately began to reverse, the driver panicking. Command element down, Rachel confirmed. For a moment, the enemy advance faltered. Claire could see the infantry teams hesitating, looking toward the rear, waiting for orders that weren't coming. The suppressive fire from the other vehicles slackened as crews tried to figure out what had happened. They're confused, Claire said. This is our window. Tell Walsh to push. Rachel relayed the order, and Claire watched as the defenders on the eastern wall surged forward, retaking positions they'd lost, pouring fire into disorganized enemy ranks. The momentum had shifted, briefly fragile but real. Then the armored vehicles began to move, not retreating, advancing. Claire, we have a problem. She saw it at the same moment Rachel did. The 5 remaining vehicles were forming into a wedge formation, engines roaring as they accelerated toward the perimeter wall. The enemy infantry was falling in behind them, using the vehicles as mobile cover. It was a final push, overwhelming force concentrated on a single point, designed to breach the wall and pour into the courtyard. If they got through, it was over. 37 soldiers couldn't hold a courtyard assault against 60-plus infantry, supported by armor. The base would fall, and everyone inside would die. Claire, Rachel's voice was barely controlled. Those vehicles are going to hit the wall in about 90 seconds. Our people don't have anything that can stop them. Claire's mind raced. The vehicles were armored, not heavily. BTR-40s had about 8 millimeters of armor at best, but enough to stop small arms fire. A .308 round wouldn't penetrate the hull. She needed a different target. The lead vehicle, she said. I can see the driver's viewport. It's not armored glass. It's a slit with protective cover. If I can thread a round through that slit, that's an 850-meter shot through a 6-inch opening on a moving target. I know. Claire, do you have a better idea? Silence. The vehicles were closing fast. 70 seconds now, maybe less. Claire could hear the roar of their engines, even from 300 meters away. Take the shot, Rachel said. Claire forced herself to breathe. 850 meters. Moving target. 6-inch opening. Wind northeast gusting. Temperature dropping. Her hands growing numb despite everything. This wasn't a difficult shot. This was an impossible shot, the kind of shot that appeared in training manuals as an example of what not to attempt. But impossible was relative. Claire had made impossible shots before. She tracked the lead vehicle through her scope, calculating trajectory, speed, wind drift. The driver would be focused on the wall ahead, hands on the controls, body position behind the viewport. A moving target behind moving cover, seen through a gap smaller than a spread hand. Her father had told her once, when she was 12 years old and holding her first rifle, that every shot was a conversation between the shooter and the universe. You ask permission to bend physics in your favor. Sometimes the universe said yes. Sometimes it didn't. She asked now, silently, her finger finding the trigger. The vehicle was 40 seconds from the wall. Claire adjusted her hold. 3 feet high to account for bullet drop. 2 feet left to compensate for the wind. She tracked the viewport, watching it bounce and weave as the vehicle navigated the uneven terrain. 30 seconds. She found her moment. A slight straightening of the vehicle's path as it hit a section of clear ground. 20 seconds. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked. The round left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second, immediately beginning to drop and drift. Claire watched through the scope, tracking the bullet's path by instinct and prayer. 1 second. 1.5 seconds. The viewport exploded inward. The lead vehicle swerved violently, no longer under control, and slammed into the ruins at the edge of the approach road. The infantry behind it scattered as the second vehicle, unable to stop in time, crashed into the first, metal grinding against metal in a shower of sparks. Direct hit. Rachel's voice came through the radio, something like awe in her tone. Claire, direct hit. The column is broken. The remaining vehicles were trying to reorganize, but the momentum was lost. Without the lead vehicle, without coordination, the assault had become a confused mess of reversing armor and panicking infantry. The defenders poured fire into the chaos, and Claire watched enemy soldiers fall in 1s and 2s and 3s. She kept shooting. Her magazine emptied. She reloaded, firing again, targeting squad leaders and machine gunners, anyone who looked like they were trying to reorganize the attack. Her count passed 20 and kept climbing. Somewhere across the battlefield, Rachel was doing the same. 2 sisters, 2 rifles, 200 rounds between them, holding a line that should have collapsed hours ago. The enemy began to retreat. It wasn't organized, not a tactical withdrawal, but a rout. Men abandoning positions, running for the tree line, leaving their wounded behind. The surviving vehicles reversed into ruins, their heavy guns silent now, their crews more interested in escape than engagement. Claire kept firing until they were out of range. Then she lowered the rifle and let her head drop against the cold metal platform. She was shaking, not from cold, from adrenaline, from exhaustion, from the slowly dawning realization of what she'd just done. Claire. Rachel's voice, soft now, almost gentle. You okay? I'm okay. That shot. I know. No, you don't. Rachel's laugh was half-sob. That shot is going to become a legend. 850 meters, through a 6-inch opening, on a moving target. That's going to be the new impossible standard. Claire closed her eyes. Rachel, how many did we lose? A pause. Final count isn't in yet. Preliminary, 14 Kia. 23 wounded. 14 dead. Claire had known some of them, had passed them in the corridors, seen them at breakfast, learned their names during the midnight range session. Good soldiers. Rachel's soldiers. Her soldiers now, in a way. QRF is 20 minutes out, Rachel continued. We held. Claire. The base held. Because of you. The QRF arrived at 0812. 3 Black Hawks and 2 Apache gunships that swept over the base with a kind of overwhelming force that felt almost insulting after 4 hours of desperate defense. Claire watched from the water tower as fresh soldiers fast roped into the courtyard, as medics triaged the wounded, as officers began the slow process of counting bodies and assessing damage. She hadn't climbed down immediately. She stayed on the platform, her rifle beside her, watching the sunrise paint the snow-covered ruins in shades of gold and pink. It was beautiful, obscenely beautiful. After a night of death, the radio crackled. Isis is still. You planning to come down eventually? Eventually. There are some who want to talk to you. Claire sighed. Of course there were. She fired approximately 200 rounds in an unauthorized combat action as a civilian visitor on a classified military installation. The legal implications were staggering. Court-martial, loss of pension, possible criminal charges. She'd known the risks when she picked up that rifle. She'd accepted them, but knowing and accepting didn't make the consequences any less terrifying. She climbed down the ladder slowly, her muscles screaming from hours of holding firing positions in sub-zero temperatures. By the time she reached the ground, Rachel was waiting for her, and so was a man Claire didn't recognize, a major with the insignia of an intelligence unit and the kind of face that suggested he'd seen things that hadn't made the official reports. Sergeant Claire Hendress, the major said. Not a question. Former sergeant. I'm a civilian now. I'm aware. He glanced at Rachel, then back at Claire. I'm Major Torres, JSOC liaison. I've been reviewing the after-action reports from Captain Hendricks. Your performance last night was irregular. Is that what we're calling it? Unauthorized, technically illegal, and in direct violation of approximately 17 regulations I can think of off the top of my head. Torres's expression was unreadable. Also exceptional. The dual-vector shot that eliminated the enemy command element is being studied by our targeting specialists. The vehicle kill at 850 meters through a moving viewport is, frankly, being treated with skepticism because no one believes it's possible. It was possible, so I'm told. Torres produced a tablet and showed Claire a series of images, her rifle scope view, reconstructed from the digital recording feature Rachel's rifle apparently had. The final shot, frame by frame. The viewport, the impact, the spray of glass and blood. We confirm 19 kills attributed to your position. Torres continued. Captain Hendricks has 17. Combined, you two accounted for approximately 40% of total enemy casualties during the engagement. Claire said nothing. The numbers felt abstract, disconnected from the reality of what she'd done. The question, Torres said, is what happens next? You violated regulations. You engage in combat without authorization. You use classified military equipment as a civilian. He paused. You also save this base and everyone in it. Those facts need to be balanced. Court-martial, Claire said flatly. That's what happens next. That's one option. Torres put the tablet away. There are others. Rachel stepped forward. Major Torres has been in contact with Fort Benning, with the Advanced Marksmanship School specifically. They've been watching your file for some time, Torres added. Your record from Kandahar, the shot that still holds the theater record, made you a person of interest. When you were assigned to desk duty, there were questions about why. When you were kept in that position for 32 months despite requests for reassignment, there were more questions. Claire felt something shift inside her. What kind of questions? The kind that get answered by people with more stars than I have. Torres glanced around, ensuring they weren't overheard. I've been authorized to offer you a position. Senior instructor at the Advanced Marksmanship School. Full reinstatement to active duty, with some modifications to your personnel file that will make last night's irregularities disappear. Disappear. Classified. Officially, you were never here. Your leave pass was to visit your sister in Germany, not Afghanistan. You returned to Fort Campbell without incident, and a week later, you received orders to transfer to Fort Benning. Torres' smile was thin but genuine. Unofficially, you're now part of a very small list of people with emergency recall capability. If situations like last night occur in the future, we want the option to put you where you're needed. Claire stared at him, trying to process what she was hearing. Not punishment, opportunity. A way back into the world. She'd been forced to leave. Why? She asked finally. Torres shrugged. Because you're too valuable to waste behind a desk. And because what you did last night proved something that some of you have believed for a long time. That there are people in this military who don't fit the traditional structures, but who serve purposes that can't be served any other way. He met her eyes directly. You're a weapon, Sergeant Hendricks. A precision instrument. Last night, you were deployed properly for the first time in 32 months. The results speak for themselves. Claire looked at her sister. Rachel's face was carefully neutral, but Claire could see the hope underneath. Hope that this would work. That Claire would accept that the path forward wasn't prison and disgrace, but redemption and purpose. Fort Benning, Claire said slowly. Advanced Marksmanship School. You be training the trainers, Torres confirmed. The people who teach the next generation of designated marksmen and snipers. Your experience, your record, your unconventional approach will be invaluable. And the recall capability? Classified. But let's say that if a situation arises where your particular skills are needed, really needed, not just wanted, you may receive a phone call. You would not be obligated to accept, but the option would exist. Claire thought about her desk at Fort Campbell. The unread reports. The qualification shoots that meant nothing. The nightmares about paperwork and irrelevance. Then she thought about last night. The cold metal of the rifle against her cheek. The clarity of purpose. The knowledge that what she was doing mattered. I'll take it, she said. Torres nodded. I thought you might. We'll begin processing your transfer immediately. In the meantime, Captain Hendricks needs to complete her after-action reports, and you need to be debriefed on the official version of events." He started to walk away, then paused. "For what it's worth, Sergeant, well done. Not many people could have done what you did." He left, and Claire stood in the courtyard with her sister, surrounded by the aftermath of a battle that should have been a massacre. "Fort Benning," Rachel said. "That's only 400 miles from Mom's place. I know. You could visit more, see people, have something like a normal life between deployments." Claire almost laughed. "You're talking about normal life? You're standing in the middle of a frozen ghost town, commanding a base that the Army barely acknowledges exists." Fair point. Rachel's smile was tired but real. "We're both pretty terrible at normal." They walked together through the courtyard, past medics treating the wounded, past soldiers securing perimeter, past the covered bodies of the 14 who hadn't survived the night. Claire looked at each covered form, trying to commit them to memory even though she didn't know most of their names. "They died holding the line," Rachel said, reading her expression. "They knew the risks. We all do. Doesn't make it easier." "No, it doesn't." Rachel stopped beside one of the bodies. A young soldier, couldn't have been more than 20. Private First Class Chun, communications specialist. She was in the tower when the first mortar hit. Didn't even have time to grab her weapon. Claire was silent. "I'm going to write a letter to her parents," Rachel continued. "Tell them she died doing something that mattered, that she was brave, even if she didn't have the chance to prove it." She looked at Claire. "That's all any of us can hope for, right? To die doing something that matters. I'd rather not die at all. That's not really an option in this profession." They reached Rachel's quarters, damaged now. One wall blown out by a mortar that had missed the building's foundation by inches. Claire helped her sister salvage what could be salvaged, packing gear into duffel bags that would be transferred to temporary quarters. "Stay another day," Rachel said suddenly. "You don't have to leave immediately. Torres said your transfer would take time to process. Stay and help with the recovery." Claire considered. She had nowhere to be. The desk at Fort Campbell would wait, and apparently it wouldn't be her problem much longer anyway. And the thought of leaving now, of walking away from this place, and these people before the dust had settled, felt wrong. "One more day," she agreed. "But then I have to go. Start preparing for Benning." Rachel nodded. One more day. That night, after the wounded had been evacuated and the dead had been prepared for transport and the perimeter had been reinforced with QRF assets, Claire climbed the water tower again. Not to shoot this time, just to watch. The snow was falling softly now, covering the blood and the bullet holes and the scorch marks with a clean white layer that made everything look peaceful. In a few hours, you wouldn't be able to tell that a battle had been fought here. The snow would erase it all, leaving only the memory of what had happened. Claire sat on the platform, her back against the water tank, and let the cold wash over her. She should have been exhausted. She was exhausted, but sleep felt impossible. There was too much adrenaline still in her system, too many images cycling through her mind. The enemy sniper in her crosshairs, the PCAM crew falling, the vehicle swerving into the ruins, the covered bodies in the courtyard. Her radio crackled. "Ice, I'm here. Thought you'd be up there." Rachel's voice was soft. "Want company?" "Always." 5 minutes later, Rachel pulled herself onto the platform and settled beside her sister. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the snow fall. Two identical women who had found themselves in the same place for the first time in years. "I've been thinking," Rachel said finally. "Dangerous habit. About what Torres said. About you being a weapon." Rachel turned to face her. "He's not wrong, but he's not entirely right either. You're not just a weapon. You're the person who takes impossible shots to save people you've never met. You're the person who puts herself in danger so others don't have to be. That's not being a weapon. That's being a guardian." Claire didn't respond. "I'm going to stay here," Rachel continued. "Delta 7. They're sending reinforcements, expanding the base, promoting me to major if the paperwork goes through." She laughed softly. "Imagine that. Major Rachel Hendricks, commanding a base that now actually matters. You always mattered. Tell that to headquarters." Rachel pulled her jacket tighter against the cold. "But that's not the point. The point is, we're both going to be in places where we're needed, where our skills actually mean something. And maybe that's all either of us ever wanted. Claire thought about that. Maybe. Promise me something. What? Promise me that when you're at Benning training the next generation of shooters, you'll tell them about tonight. Not the technical details. They'll learn those anyway. But the other part, the part about why we do this, about holding the line for people who can't hold it themselves. Rachel's voice cracked slightly. About being willing to break the rules when the rules would get good people killed. Claire was quiet for a long moment. The snow continued to fall, gentle and relentless, erasing the evidence of violence one flake at a time. I promise, she said. They sat together until dawn. Two sisters who had found their way back to each other through fire and blood and the shared language of precision and purpose. When the sun finally rose over the frozen ruins, they climbed down together and walked back to the base side by side. 3 years later, Claire Hendress, now known throughout the special operations community as ICE, stood at the front of the classroom at Fort Benning's Advanced Marksmanship School. 20 candidates for the Army's most elite sniper program sat before her, their faces a mixture of anticipation and carefully concealed nervousness. You've heard the stories, she began. The 850-meter shot through a moving viewport. The dual-vector engagement that eliminated an enemy command element. The night that FOB Delta 7 should have fallen, but didn't. She paused, letting the silence build. Those stories are true. I know because I was there. The candidates sat straighter in their chairs. But here's what the stories don't tell you. They don't tell you about the 32 months I spent behind a desk before that night, slowly going crazy with purposelessness. They don't tell you about the nightmares, the doubt, the certainty that everything I trained for was being wasted. They don't tell you that when I took those shots, I was technically a civilian, unauthorized, illegal, breaking every regulation I'd ever sworn to uphold. She walked among the desks, meeting each candidate's eyes in turn. What the stories don't tell you is that being a sniper isn't about the shots you make. It's about being ready, always ready, for the moment when those shots matter. It's about maintaining your skills during the 32 months of peace, so that when the 4 hours of war come, you can do what needs to be done. She returned to the front of the classroom. My sister is a major now. She commands FOB Delta 7, which has been expanded into a full forward operating base with 300 personnel. They call her Steel. The soldiers under her command would follow her into hell itself, and some of them have. Claire smiled slightly. We still talk every week. Still shoot together when our schedules align. Still cover each other's backs, even from 1,000 miles away. Outside the classroom window, the Georgia sun was rising over the training ranges, a different landscape from the frozen ruins of Afghanistan, but the same sky, the same purpose. I'm going to teach you how to make impossible shots, Claire said. How to read wind and distance and trajectory, how to calculate holds that shouldn't work and take them anyway. But more than that, I'm going to teach you why. Because a sniper without purpose is just a person with a rifle. A sniper with purpose is a guardian, someone who holds the line when the line can't hold itself. She looked out at the candidates, seeing in their faces the same hunger she'd felt at 17, the same determination, the same willingness to become something more than ordinary. Welcome to Advanced Marksmanship School, she said. Let's get to work. 3,000 miles away, Major Rachel Hendress stood on the observation platform of the newly reinforced FOB Delta 7, watching her soldiers run morning drills in the snow. The base had changed since that night 3 years ago, expanded, reinforced, properly supplied for the first time since she'd taken command. But some things remained the same. She lifted her rifle, the same custom Remington 700 she'd carried that night, and sighted downrange toward the 750-meter target. Her breath frosted in the cold air. The wind was northwest at 8 knots, just like it had been the night Claire had returned to her. She squeezed the trigger. The steel rang. Somewhere in Georgia, she knew, her sister was doing the same thing. Different ranges, different students, different missions, but the same purpose, the same bond. Ice and steel, she murmured to herself, working the bolt, always watching her back. The sun continued to rise over frozen mountains, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink. The same sunrise Claire had watched from the water tower 3 years ago. The same beauty that felt almost sacred after a night of violence and sacrifice. The base stood, the line held, and two sisters bound by blood and purpose and a promise forged in fire continued their watch at opposite ends of the world. Always ready, always together, always